Hi, welcome to the 15th episode of the Startups Rights. Today, my guest is Dr. Hendrik Steenfadt. He is a medical doctor turned venture capital investor, investing out of one of the leading VC firms in Europe, Speedinvest. Welcome, Hendrik.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, this is my genuine pleasure. Obviously, it was a very brief introduction, but I've prepared some questions on the side. So as we go through them, we'll delve more into your background, and your work. I guess without further ado, my first question would be about your background. Right? I'm really curious why you decided to study medicine and why you decided to transition away from medicine and start working in the VC field.
No, I love it. I mean, yeah, I think it's a very obviously not a common way to go go all the way through medical school and then afterwards decide to leave the hospital floors and go into venture. I mean, you can imagine, right? And we spoke about this before. It's a very difficult pitch also to your peers and family if you study for that long and then afterwards try to pursue a different career. But maybe to start, really, I think it was not really like my entire childhood and youth life always wanting to be in medicine. I mean, there are these people, right, that at 5 years they say, okay, I want to be a surgeon, I want to be a pediatric whatever. I was never like that, really. I actually always wanted to go into finance all my youth life, which is also quite unusual and a little bit weird when I look back, right? But the idea of actually going to medical school was actually really late. So I would pin it down maybe to the last stages of high school in Germany when I the idea popped into my head, and when I just started going to university right after school, I very felt at home immediately. So it was the right decision to pursue a medical degree. So I was very happy, and also when I look back, the entire studies were really great. I can't really say anything negative about it, really. So I really enjoyed it. I was, blood and flesh, full-time medical person, spending all my free time in the operating room. I loved it to be in the hospital and on the clinic hallways. It was very exciting times, and obviously diving really deep into the science around the entire medical field has been very, very challenging, but also very nice road to go over all these years. So I do not regret it, right? So if you're asking me the choice of originally going into medical school and pursuing a career as a medical doctor has always been a good one, I would say.
And what motivated your transition? Because I feel like once you invest so much time and you genuinely enjoy it, right? Especially since you sound like you really enjoyed it. What made you like, you know what? I'm actually gonna start doing VC work, venture capital work.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's the right question to ask, right? Because I mean, I would frame it like this: maybe the more time you spend actually working on site in clinics and with patients and in the actual system. And this was the same with me when I was working in Zurich at the university clinic, and latest in Berlin at the Charité, which is also the university hospital here. You start to realize all these like very prominent failures in the system, right? And at the beginning, I think all of young doctors are very motivated, and passionate about what they do, and it was the same with me. But after time, and this kicks in quite quickly, I would say, actually, you start to realize, okay, everything you do is actually in some way at least, being influenced by very severe failures of the system. And I think this was maybe at some point the tipping point for me when I learned, okay, the actual diagnostic and treatments that I have with my patients is influenced by so many things that I can't control, right? So I mean, you have so many stakeholders involved in the hospital and the general healthcare system. You have like the hospitals, right, which are might be public, might be private. You have the public healthcare insurances, you have the private healthcare insurances. You have the entire pharmaceutical a world which is entirely private, and you have the government, which is influencing the regulations with legislation and new ideas, right? You have the research community, which is also like semi-private, public in a sense. So as you can see, you have a lot of different incentives and people that try to navigate in the system. And when you're standing alone on, the clinic yard and want to treat a single patient, all these different things are start to cross the room at a certain point, and the area of maneuvering starts to become smaller and smaller. And this is a weird feeling, and I had this really remember this feeling in a very vivid way, actually, because you're standing there and you're thinking, okay, I actually only want to, provide a good work and give a good treatment opportunity to the patient in front of me. But then there's so many different things that you also need to think of, right? You need to think of, can I reimburse medication for this patient with this special insurance? You need to be responsible for the reimbursement with your hospital, with your employer. Actually, you need to work the entire bureaucratic overload in the background for that patient. You need to navigate internally in the hospital if this is aligned with everything. So the room for the actual, medical stuff that go through your head is also becoming smaller and smaller. And also when I think of a normal workday in the clinic, right? The amount time spent on actual, thinking time. Is this a good therapy? Is this a good, way to go? Is the vast minority of time at actual work. The majority of time is just bureaucratic, very simple work stuff. Is a lot of, alignment between parties. And this is not really nice because after all, or after a time, you realize that this work that you do in or this circumstances that starting to add up over time are not beneficial for the patient. And this is a very weird feeling also, because as a medical doctor, normally you have the most top proxy to be of benefit, right? In a medical sense, you want to do good, you want to do no harm, which is actually the Hippocratic aid that you do after you graduate. So yeah, this is the top line, right? That you should do no harm. And now I'm speaking a lot, right? But this really goes down to the point where I really had the feeling that in some scenarios we actually did actively harm the patient in a way. This does not mean that, you are grabbing a scalpel and putting it in your patient, but all the weird circumstances of chronic diseases and cross-medication and not good social embedding really contributed to a point where I actively asked, would have been better to just do nothing with that grandma and just send her home, right? Compared to like multi-stage MRI diagnostic and a lot of blood work on the side, and then over diagnosing this, and then another medication, and then she had surgery, and then you really come to a point where you ask yourself that very philosophical question of in what direction are we steering here? And it was really that point, I think, after years so of being in that system, where I realized what else is out there, right? To make it short. Yeah.
First of all, don't even worry about speaking a lot, because I'm not here to hear my own voice. It's literally just to talk, and I want to hear your opinion. So speak as much as you want to. Two, what I'm curious about is, you said you were always interested in finance, and you could have transitioned really,
Right.
to consulting, to IB. I see a lot of doctors really switching to management consulting later on. You could have gone like, private equity, IB, whatever, right? But you really switched more in a VC direction. What really motivated you in that, in that direction?
That direction. Yeah, it's also a good question, I think, right? Because it's also not the obvious choice, because you were being very accurate when you were saying the moment you confront a physician, medical doctor of alternative career pathways, the first thing they would always say is McKinsey, BCG, management consultancy, always. And this was also the thing I heard. It was the first thing that also came to my mind, because these companies are so present, everybody knows them. So the next logical thing for you to go to or to turn your head to are these management consulting companies without even knowing what they're actually doing. So how to tell this best? I mean, I think the first, point of actually making the decision in my head to even search for alternatives was already very hard, because you were saying it before, right? You spend so much time in the hospital medical system, and you actually like, the core essence of the job. You like the interaction with patients. So it's not easy to turn the switch in your head and to actually pursue another career. And this is also, I think, a very important point, at least to me. The entire medical studies, and you can see this in basically every country, are not designed to push you in another direction except for like clinic career, which is, from the incentive, very plausible from their point of view, because obviously, especially in European countries where most of your studies is being paid by the government, they obviously want the young doctors working in hospital later on, right? So it would make, from first basically intuition, no sense for them to say, okay, we're gonna like hardcore motivate them to seek for alternative career pathways and entrepreneurship and everything. But this is a very problematic thinking, and I'm going to explain to you why in a second. So to go back to me, I think I very proactively for myself try to first navigate the market situation. So look out there, speak to as many people as possible, talk to my friends and peers, and just get a feeling of what these different alternatives would even mean, right? So you hear about management consulting companies, you know the name, but you don't know what they're actually doing, right? So you have a picture in your head, right, of consultants, taking a plane on a Monday and going to a project somewhere and then going back, and very hard work and a lot of Excel and slides and blah blah blah. But the actual, what is actually in the job, so your day-to-day work, was never really, top of my head. And the same goes for all these other industries. So the next thing you maybe start about, think about going into pharma or corporate world, or you think about actually, going into private equity or IB, which is also not very, I think, common knowledge when you graduate medical school. So for me, it was really finding, taking the first steps, basically finding a way of understanding for myself what it would actually mean to work outside of the hospital, because I had no idea. And this is actually, the first fundamental problem in these studies, because you have no education and no mentoring whatsoever to get a education for yourself of what the world looks like. And what I was saying before, I spent a lot of time asking this myself, because I struggled a lot, I think, in this process, because normally people within the medical ecosystem would not support you. They would, first of all, be very critical about this even thinking process in your head. They'd say, why you do this? Are you only doing this for the money? Is the first direct reaction. Are you not, being a good Samaritan anymore and want to treat patients? But this is a very rigid way to think about the modern world and also how medicine works. Because when you think about medicine, and again, the highest proxy that you should have in your head is to improve the entire system of providing good care for the human race in the end, for every person on the planet, right? And then the next step should be to ask yourself, what do you need to go into that direction in the next year, in the next 5, in the next 10 years? And obviously, what you need are very highly educated doctors on premise that are working on patient. That is absolutely needed. But medicine is not like, in the 80s anymore, where you have a old white male doctor with a cape coat, being entirely capable of navigating the entire medical landscape and only, listening to the heart and then looking at one X-ray, and then you have the solution for all diseases, basically. Medicine over the last couple of decades has become so complex in itself to manage, that so many more parties need to be involved, basically, to make it good for the patient. So a simple example, if old woman in her 80s, falls down in the winter because it's icy outside and breaks her hip, right? Which is the absolute classic in every country around the planet. The normal next thing for that patient would be to go to the emergency room and maybe get a hip replacement. And the surgeons on premise are very skilled to do that hip replacement. And she's going to stay in the hospital for a couple of days, right? And get pain medication and so on. But to ask yourself, what is actually, the cause of why that woman, fell down, and what is going to happen as soon as you release that person into the real world anymore is not your top priority in the healthcare infrastructure. And to some degree, that's okay. You can't, guide this single grandma for the next years of her life. But in a lot of these cases, you're just going to release so many patients after surgery, for instance, into their homes, even though the level of treatment that they would actually need is not being provided. Social care, the right medication, follow-on retreatments, rehabilitation, physical therapy, and so on and so forth, right? And it's very problematic, especially as the general population and the Western countries are getting more and more older, to navigate this very complex diseases of chronic diseases. And this is really a big problem because it's insanely high burden from the financial side in the healthcare system in general, and the system is not made up to provide that long-term care. Especially, I would say, in the US and Germany and in Japan and all these like very high-tech countries, the level of quality in care is very high on a acute level. So if you have a very serious disease, like very rare brain tumor or a complex genetic condition, or also trauma, if you have a multi-car accident on the highway, the chopper will come and pick you up. So that system is working very effectively, and you can have like high level of treatment. But the chronic side is very problematic, very problematic. And you can also see it actually in the feedback you get from patients, because, the general patient, I would say, that I interacted with, especially in the 60, 70 plus region, no matter if they're coming like from their outpatient doctor, their GP, or they're, I don't know, exiting the hospital, the general impression from them is normally very negative, because the actual surgery might have been a good or a success, but the overall treatment or defining their problem, what they're actually worried about, most probably has not been defined or not been addressed. So this is a very weird situation, because then you said, yeah, okay, I did my job, I did the hip or knee replacement very accurately, trained for it for longer, but maybe the patient is still not happy. And then what did you do in medicine? You actually, did you harm the patient? Maybe not, but you also didn't really, provide good care from my perspective. And this is, again, I think, a weird condition where a lot of people, especially in medical education, are not being, trained in the right way. But it's also a very complex problem, because, again, you have so many areas to think of and so many more complex things that are added to the system. So I'm not saying, that I have the answer to all these things, but those are, the thoughts that came to my mind over time and started to accumulate kind of. And now here I am.
No, it's so true. I spent some time in UK and now I've been here in US for a while. And I feel like, I'm from Azerbaijan too, originally, right? Like, so, really looking at most healthcare systems around the world, there's not one that really works perfectly. You look at US, it's either too expensive, and you look at UK, it's huge waiting times. And it's like, what's the right solution? And as you said, it's very complex problem because there's so many interdependent factors. There's so many variables involved. And back to your medicine point, I I'm very much, I like medicine a lot. I like science. I don't think I like science enough to do a PhD, but I like science enough where like medicine just seems it's perfect, sort of like a VC, where it's a generalist approach to human body. And I'm reading a book on history of medicine, and it's very, obviously, history of medicine will have issues because we didn't get here just in one day. It was a process, so there are issues and problems. But looking at it, I have this idealized version of medicine, which, like, when I look at now, I feel like it's really not that anymore. You're essentially like an employee, and instead of being
Exactly.
like a person that was really serving the community, person that was really just really one of the anchor points of community, right? And I feel like I'm still debating whether I should pursue medicine or not, just because of that. Because there's this idealized version in my head, and there is the actual reality. Um, it's really fascinating what you just said. You're primarily investing out of Europe, right? And looking
Right.
at VC, it's a very new saying. It's not really like it's not a profession that's been around for ages. It started really around when the dot-com bubble started in the US. There was huge availability of cash and capital and the concentration of tech talent, and just really also the US has a more kind of like a risk friendly approach to investing and just going out there and doing it. But Europe also has created its own vibrant VC community and produced many unicorns, many startups. Investing out of Europe, how do you feel about the VC ecosystem and the startup ecosystem in Europe? And
Right.
what changes would you like to see? And another question, I don't want to ask too many questions, you can ask me again, but how do you think governments can help to foster that ecosystem further?
No, I think this goes right to the point which you just mentioned. And I actually this morning had a chat with a friend from another VC company exactly about this topic because also looking back at my own history, when I was working on my PhD and being in like hardcore science environment, wet lab, working, with mice at the very core of understanding how the body works, which is super interesting on a, scientific and academic level because you can really, narrow it down to this molecule and I don't know, then you start to analyzing the genome and the DNA, and it's very fascinating. But the, at a certain point, you also look at the output. What does actually mean, And the comparison between US and Europe, especially when you look at VC and innovation, is very prominent in this specific aspect. Because when you look also at the historics of how countries and innovation thrives over time, there needs to be certain cofactors present basically to create a setting of where disruptive innovation can happen. And it's a very complex and also very interesting question looking at the entire location of Europe, basically, because when you basically zoom back a little and look at the ending or beginning of the 20th century, where all these great corporates that you now have in Europe evolved, this was also a time of great innovation in Europe. The industrialization and I don't know, novel car companies emerging, and this was a time where there were little to no barriers of people that wanted to thrive in new technology, basically. And also, when you look at Germany in specific, in this time, you could also witness that the system, basically, or the triangle, you could say, of a very good core of education, good universities, a setting of political will and regulation, and money basically coming in, all work together at this point. And you could see the same instance for the first steps of the Silicon Valley in the 70s and 80s, where you had exactly that same basically cooperation. And China is going in a similar direction now, but basically it's been very interesting looking at this historical, metrics, because then you really start to understand, okay, how does innovation really work? And there's so many, things to that aspect that I could point out, but essentially putting it down to a couple of points. Also for myself, I started to realize, right, that I wanted to be at the very forefront of that innovation in healthcare and in medicine. And when you do research at the university level, you are very at the core of the science part. But spinning that out, making it work to an actual product, and then scaling it to a degree where it can actually change something, only staying at the university level is very, very difficult because you always are basically pressed down by the system. To really make an impact on a macro scale level, and I don't know, this can be in science, this can be in engineering, this can be in climate tech and space tech, wherever basically, to find these new disruptive technologies, you not only it's not just a plus, it's needed basically and that all these forces, come together at a certain point. Otherwise, you won't succeed, basically. And comparing Europe and the US is somewhat of a tragedy, actually, in the last couple of decades, because when you look at these corporates that I just mentioned from the beginning of the 20th century, and that are still very successful, right? Big engineering companies like Bosch, car companies like Porsche, Mercedes, and so on, engineering companies like Siemens, they're still present in the entire world, and they're still successful. They're big global corporates, and they are the very reason of why Europe, Central Europe, and especially Germany, is still so successful. But now, especially as we see, insane increase, in technology development, you start to ask yourself, we need to basically catch up with new technology. And this classic problem of the corporate world is to, tack to these old systems and their old structures, and they might miss out on these new tech developments. And the car industry is actually a very good example of that development, because, when you look at the development of electric vehicles, for instance, and it's not too long ago, right? So like 10 years ago, people were talking about electric vehicles and when they will become a commodity and so on. And you have, I could name, I don't know, 6 very successful global car companies that are all in Europe and all around here. Like you have BMW, Mercedes, Audi, VW, and so on, right? And they all lost basically the fight to develop a electric vehicle to a startup, Tesla, from California, which is absolutely weird when you think about it. So when you would ask these engineers, and there were like 100,000 of them around the world in German car companies, can you develop electric vehicle? They would all say, yeah, we could, but maybe it's too complex, the timing is not right. And then you had like a little company that emerged out of nowhere with venture backing that disrupted basically this entire system and became more valuable in the end than all of these combined. And this is a punch in the face basically for these companies. And you can have you have these examples with all different providers basically, right? So you have that in the tech scene with the new tech companies in California. You have now the development again with electric vehicles in China, and so on and so forth. What I'm trying to say basically, the future really, or innovation, disruptive technology, is most unlikely created in existing system, but needs to be developed in new systems. And this is sometimes, not always, but sometimes as a chance basically for the startup and entrepreneurial community, because they create young companies that are very dynamic in a very micro unregulated environment, and that's the chance of actually creating this very, very unique opportunities of disrupting a completely new thinking. And this always excited me, looking at these first examples that I witnessed over the years, because they can see, okay, this is actually a chance of creating something entirely new. And this is very exciting. Another very vivid example from Germany, and was also been very impressive for me, is the upscaling and success of BioNTech, the biotech from Mainz in Germany. It's near where I was born, that developed the first vaccine in cooperation with Pfizer against COVID in the pandemic. And the story behind this company is very fascinating, because actually founded by 2 medical doctors, also not far from where I grew up. And they're also very passionate when you hear them talk, working in the clinic. And then they also left the clinic because they were frustrated with the system and started their own company. And then 10 years later, they were the first on the planet to develop this very novel mRNA vaccine technology that then Pfizer licensed basically, and changed the world basically. And they also said, when you hear them talk, never, ever, fucking ever, they could have done this in a university or public setting, because it's just too slow. Also in a public company or so. And then you can ask yourselves also globally, when you are very critical, okay, the COVID vaccine didn't come from Harvard, didn't come from Stanford, not from Charité here in Berlin, not from China, but from like a privately held VC-backed startup from 2 medical doctors that were faster than the rest. And that's just very, also picturing the problem of this entire system. And I'm telling you this because it speaks very well in the direction of what I'm trying to say. But it's it's been very, I think, vivid examples that over time that made me go even more in the direction of this very entrepreneur and innovative ecosystem over time.
I am so immersed in this conversation. I'm not even following the script right now. I'm just like asking questions based on what you say. Um, you, first of all, the Tesla thing is so on point, right? Like Tesla was failing actually. It wasn't even a like successful company when it started out, and then it just suddenly became the major global electric vehicle maker. Another thing is I would say the culture, the mindset, right? Like I feel like America, you're
Right.
encouraged to really go out and start something new. In Europe, it's a bit more conservative and traditional, and they're like, this is working. We don't need something new, right? Like, and another thing I would say is, and it's my personal opinion, and I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. I feel like Europe is really heavy on regulation, right? Like the
Right.
AI saying AI regulation law was passed not too long ago. I didn't really read much into it, but
Right.
and
Yep.
to be honest, we haven't even like yes, it's significant the strides we made with LLMs, large language models, and AI and OpenAI and whatever. But it's not like we've created artificial intelligence, right? It's a much more improved machine learning um, kind of thing. So like do you think it's very heavy on regulation? Do you think it needs improvement in that aspect, in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously also the thing that, in my day-to-day work, people talk about the most, I think, and it's a problem, definitely. I think, also again, the three centers, China, Western Europe, and US compared, Europe is by far, far, far the most regulated um, um, uh, place where you can locate as a company. And this is increasingly becoming a problem, especially when you're an entrepreneur. And again, it's not about being, totally against regulation. For instance, in the matter of AI, I think it's absolutely plausible that you have certain regulations for development and novel companies. And the same applies for healthcare. I mean, I'm not, that much of a liberalist that I think, okay, we should entirely, be on a capital market when it comes down to healthcare. Not at all, all right? You should definitely have regulations present in a system to guide the market situation, companies that go hand in hand with the public sector to provide the best outcome for us all, right? And that's, again, highest proxy. And it's been weird because there are also very cynical voices in the industry that already seem Europe as a very doomed place, and there's no going back. And what was it recently that I read? Europe is constantly trying to regulate tech that they didn't build, that they couldn't afford, or something like this. So you have all these you have all these big tech companies, and it's true. It's also the point to earlier. When you look at the 10 most valuable companies from the United States, 9 of them are tech companies and 9 of them are venture backed. When you look at the 10 most valuable companies in Germany, for instance, I think 1 is venture backed, 1 is a tech company, and the rest is like old manufacturing from 100 years ago. And this also speaks very much in this direction, right? And talking about politics and regulation, of course, when you have that market dynamics, I mean, I also recently read, right, Nvidia is worth more than the entire German capital market. This is so insanely a alarming signal for the European market that I can't even put it into words. And am I saying Nvidia is going to rise even more and more? I'm not even sure. Maybe they're even like overpriced right now, but it definitely shows a tendency, right, of where this thing is going. And speaking about, or bringing up this triangle again that I spoke earlier, right, between very good science, the willingness basically to create good companies out of it, and the ecosystem, and the political regulation that needs to be just present. And the very minute that you have more or too much regulation present, it inhibits your entire innovation and entrepreneurial spirit in that location. And if the location is Europe, then you are have a very big problem, because when you bring this down from a top level to yourself as an individual, and you ask yourself as a person, okay, am I going to pursue a corporate career and just make a good salary and have not much risk, right? And can have maybe a family and so on, or am I going to take actually the risk and start my own company, becoming an entrepreneur? Every single more regulatory aspect that lies in front of you is going to bring you more into this decision of, being the more cozy one. And I'm not at all, bullying on people or whatever that, want to go more on a corporate setting. It's absolutely fine. But we are in a very, situation where the global race of leadership is, on fire right now, and becoming increasingly important on a global macro scale of who wins this. And it's I normally I'm very against, of being dramatic and being always seeing the bad things, but as a global construct, it's going to be very, very important of where the next basically future will thrive the most. And I mean, I can only say for Europe as a location, it's not very, very good right now, which is absolutely sad, because you have the very core present. You have very good people, very good science, very good universities. You have very good infrastructure. You have normally the ecosystem that would be very beneficial for such a system, but you don't have the money and you don't have the regulation for it. And that's actually a very, very big tragedy that's also impacting, obviously, the entire world of venture capital investing. Because again, when you just on a very simple level ask yourselves, okay, where do you find the next big companies of tomorrow? Where is innovation going to happen most probably? Then you need to take this very simple metrics into account. And again, you have very good companies also in Europe. You have a couple that are thriving insanely well and maybe even having a global impact. But for every company that reaches maybe this so often heard unicorn status, there are 10 more in China, probably, right? That are going in this direction. And again, I'm also struggling with this, because what do you do with it? And again, I'm an optimist. So I would still keep going and fight for this entire system. But this is also a little bit my personal story, right? Because I really, and this is also why I love you and me talking and being connected more, because this is the very essence of what is needed in the community to thrive more. Development of innovation, of founding new companies, and just in a try and error system, getting to the next stage. Because if you for too long attach to the old, you're gonna lose eventually.
That's so fair. That's so fair. I guess this is a really interesting conversation. I can really do this for hours. Going back to your work as a venture capitalist, sometimes, when I talk to my friends, they're like, oh, you should definitely do IB for a couple of years, or you should definitely do like consulting for a couple of years, because obviously VC is very soft skill focused sector, but it's also, requires some, like hard skills too. So they're like, you should really get your hard skills up to par. And unless you're like a PhD researching something, right? And you can just come in directly, because it's essential. You have to like evaluate the ideas and look at the science. When you come in just kind of like a generalist venture capitalist, how important do you think those hard skills are? Do you think they can be kind of like learned and mastered while you're working, or do you think you should definitely really try to get some experience before venturing into venture capital? And also, obviously there are different stages. There's seed stage, there's early stage, there's like a growth stage. How one should approach that?
I think there's this is definitely not a black and white answer, and there's no blueprint of how to emerge into venture capital. And as you already pointed out, there's so many different nuances to it that it's very hard to pin down what is actually needed. All I can say maybe, and this has also been something that I've been learning over time, because I ask myself, right, okay, now with like a medical degree, did my PhD very in details, very science focused. Do I need like a MBA now? Do I need to go back to school and focus on the business side, or do I need to go into a more structured IB, PE, corporate setting of learning the toolkit? And I would absolutely say that this could be a way to go, right? But there's really never, especially when you are more on the venture side, and this, by the way, is also meaning also when you want to start your own company, that it's very much learning on the job. And also when we, scout for potential founders and people that can actually do something, of course, there are a couple of attributes that you would like to see both on the founder, but also on the, I think, very good early stage investor level that are that you could find in the best actually on the market. And this is, for instance, the need for urgency, so that you can really see people, thriving until the next step. This is really the sense that you get when you talk to people, again, both on the founder, but also, let's say, for potential very good hires in venture capital, that they really, have the need for urgency to do something, to change something. This is absolutely essential when you work in that industry, that you have the very, attitude of mode of action. And this is, for instance, super important, that I think is also hard to learn, right? You need to really have this intrinsically, I think, developed over time. The other thing that I think is absolutely important, that you can maybe learn a little bit, or you can get better at least, is trying to see the bigger picture and connecting the dots. And this is also the core essence of a very good early stage investor, because it is very good if you have like a scientific education, and it doesn't matter in what field. It can be medicine, it can be engineering, it can be quantum optics, right? You can also have a PhD degree, you can also have an MBA after. It doesn't matter in the end after all. The best, or the most important, thing that it's needed basically to enter the job is to turn your head into a macro perspective, look at the different factors, assess the metrics, and then ultimately get a feeling and decision making, and be very diligent on the things that are in front of you, and then guide your way through such a, for instance, investment opportunity. And there are so many different factors attached to it that it's again very hard to pin down to a hard-coded skill set that you need, because obviously you would need to have a understanding of the industry that you're investing in. If you're investing in biotech, is, I think, essential that you are educated on how a DNA structure would look like on a biochemical level. Just very simple. If you only have a finance degree and you want to, or not only, if you have a finance degree and you want to be a biotech investor, I think you would need to do a lot of catch up on the actual science, right? If I would be needed to be a fintech investor, like very specialized on different, I don't know, fintech models in emerging markets, I would need to do a lot of catching up and actually, creating these financial models that I simply cannot do. But if you're investing in the, I would say, broader industry that you're educated in, the next most important skill set that you need in venture is, again, that macro level perspective, connecting the dots, very clearly being able to identify the problems that are out there and finding solutions that are tangible on the market and could actually work. And then again, having the urgency and also the will to act on it, to execute. And this is, I would say, the package that is, hard to acquire over a time, over a degree or something. Because, I mean, especially on the founder side, also on the investor side, you see also very young individuals that learned over time, and they're maybe just as good as anyone with a PhD from a top tier university around the planet, right? But also, what is the real picture? When you look at the founder level, it's definitely a benefit or beneficiary if you have experience in your prior life. There are these analytics of, for instance, what stations unicorn founders did over their lifespan, and what got them basically to the point of founding a unicorn company. And that's also very interesting when you can see the comparison and the things that they all have in common. And it's basically, having a very technical degree in, again, engineering, medicine, or whatever, being at least for a couple of years in a different countries, getting experience in another job, working on product in a company, being in a startup, founding one startup, and then there's a point where they most likely, start a through the roof venture. And again, I think there's no playbook to do this, right? So it's also how we work. It's not that, that I wouldn't be good at my job if I would have like a simple checklist and, just tick off, okay, this person has this quality and this degree and also PhD in this, check, then he's absolutely the right person to found the next business. That's not the way to work, I think.
Very, very true. One thing I'm curious about, there are some people who, by the way, this is such a fascinating conversation. I'm sorry if you have a hard, like a time cutoff. Let me know if you have meetings or something.
Yeah, no worries.
If you're a scientist in neuroscience, right, like been doing Alzheimer's research for the past 20 years, I feel like it's very understandable that you can look at science and be like, oh, this has a potential to become a company, right? Like this has a potential for therapeutics. But I've seen so many generalist VCs investing across so many different sectors and exiting very successfully so many different companies. And obviously, luck is involved. I really hate when people just say it's hard work. I think luck comes everywhere, right? Like you have to be in the right place at the right time with the right people. And, luck is a very important factor. But also there are some people who manage to do it again and again, right? How do you say, like, what's obviously there's not one correct answer, but I'm just curious about because you've been in the field for a while now. What's the source for, those journalist VCs that really manage to be so successful?
Yeah, I mean that's the holy grail, right? To find the thing in the end, but it's a very valid question. If I would need to pin it down to like one specific answer, I would say it's all about people. And this is also what the best investors around the globe are telling you, that being able to surround yourself by the best people out there is the best cofactor for success at a later stage. And this is the core essence also of a good investor, that they are being able to not only source for these people, but they also try to make them better over time and accumulate more of these people. And it's funny because also when I pitch to my parents my now career compared to like hospital life, I also say basically it's also a social job. Back in the days in the clinic, you interacted with patients a lot, and this is the very core also of a medical doctor. Now it's actually still the very core of my day to day. So, and this is also a very important difference to like being in IB, private equity, or management consultancies, where the majority of your time is in front of your Excel and you jiggle with numbers a lot and do like market analytics, and it's like a fun exercise, right? But most of our time is being really with people, with founders, experts, industry, key opinion leaders, and so on. And this has been also, I think, the part of my job that I like the most, because again, it's very social. It's not too much of a difference from interacting with patients. But when you have the ability and the skill even to, surround yourselves or the companies with a combination of people from different industries that basically all also combine the skills that I just mentioned. Very ambitious, need for urgency, very high, education level, and you put them at the same table. This is the very core of entrepreneurship. This is also what I like the most, basically, because in hospital life, this is what I miss the most. Because in hospital life, again, what you mentioned with the, Alzheimer disease person, it's very, being in your own tunnel. You are very on your own. You're very not interacting, not even, with the doctor next door. And it's also funny if you are, let's say, a orthopedic surgeon, again, specializing on, the elbow, then you're for 20 years, being in an operating room and going to congresses where only people that do elbow surgery are present. And you talk about the elbow all the time, and it's very important for you, right? But the point where you actually, free your mind and get into a conversation with something from an entirely different industry, let's say law or environmental studies or whatever, is very unlikely in the clinic. because you don't have time. Also, you don't have time, you don't have the resources, you don't have even the place to do so. And when I remember my first experiences in the entire venture ecosystem, the first time where I realized how much of a value add it can be to collect 5, 6, 7 people, all very smart people, very ambitious people from different industries, how much of a value creation that can be if those people interact. This has been a very, very, I think, essential moment that I realized over time. And I would really wish every person in every industry more interaction like this, because it's not only medicine, right? So again, if you're sitting at when we go back to vehicle industry, if you're sitting in the board of Mercedes-Benz, those people are not stupid, right? They're very experienced, they're very educated on cars, but most likely they're more, rigid in their system. And this has been a very, again, sad development, because I see also my former mentors from clinic days. They're insanely smart people, super, super smart, way smarter than myself, right? So professors, PhDs, all in one person, right? They know everything. They know every paper by heart, and can blindly give you the whatever molecule and so on. But what I'm basically trying to say, they were never educated what is needed on top, basically, on that knowledge to actually, take the next steps in value creation of starting a company or contributing to a bigger thing that actually, would benefit in the end the patient. Because they're so, running in their scientific communities or whatever, that they never basically find the step out of exploring what it would be like of scaling this up. And this always sounds so stupid, when a investor person talks about scaling, because I hate it when, people only think that a company is only good when you can scale it to I don't know, global level or whatever. That's absolutely not the case. I'm only talking about, joining forces and being open for a discussion, a dialogue. And this is also the sense basically of science when you think about it. You speak about something, you have an idea, you have a critical discussion and assessment around it, you try it, maybe you fail, then you try again. And this is the way you go, how you should basically develop things in general, very broadly speaking. It's also how, we as society should work on things, maybe. But if that makes sense, it's no very.
No, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. What's your approach to evaluating ideas in the pitches you get, the people that you meet, especially in the early stages? Obviously, the idea is important, and the founding team is important, and there are certain things that you can really look at in any VC book. But your personal kind of do you have an investment thesis? And also, I'm curious, what sectors are you really interested in?
Yes, I mean, of course, there are different angles where you can approach things. Definitely, we have our investment hypotheses where we, are also very sharp, and this is also the very technical part of the job, where you assess the market and dynamics and try to get a very deep understanding of what happens next, right? But also on to this question, I think there's no specific, rules or playbook that you apply to any company. There are a couple of big chunks that or big buckets where you look at. One we already spoke about. This is the team. This is essential. Then you have the product, obviously. So what are they actually doing? Then you have the market. So are they tapping in a upscaling market, downscaling market? So what is a good example? I mean, if we talk genetics, for instance, right? Then the first and best thing you should ask yourself, right, is the general field of genetics something that will thrive in the next couple of years, or rather downscale? And this is highly important to get a correct or near correct answer to this one, because you don't on the capital market. Very similarly, you don't want to invest in a downgoing market situation. And when you speak about technology, this sometimes can be very difficult, because the timing is very important, especially when you are investing in tech that is on the very front of being developed. For instance, our deep tech team and on the entire market, when they speak about quantum computing, extremely deep tech technology that the probably most brightest minds are working on at the moment, and the big tech companies are on it, and Google is on it, and everybody's working on it. But is this a good investment opportunity, right? Or is it maybe even a great investment opportunity, because now you're one of the first ones that actually put your money on it? And in investing, I think that's I think at least one of the things you still need to keep in the back of your head of where you stand in the market position. And then the next one, it might even be the most essential one, is this actually feasible of creating a product that could work in a very specific environment on this market and create revenue? Because as an investor, it's very nice to talk about all these great visions and ideas that are potentials of disrupting the entire system. But very importantly, you need to find something that is also very, concrete or pragmatic in execution, that is fast on traction, that you can develop over time a little bit, but not that the go-to-market is in 15 years. That wouldn't work as a investor, because you can't, that's not basically the game. Yeah, you need to find stuff that is fast, basically in the upscaling, or at least has the potential. And again, I really don't think that every company that is created out there needs to work like this. Far from it. If I would start my own company, I would also be very skeptical of going into that business. Not because I don't like VCs, because I know if you're in that game, you need to basically chasing a very high threshold of a very high goal. That's the target. And all these things combined that I just mentioned, I think needs to be at least on a soft level in your head. And when all these have a check mark and you think, okay, they identified a very core problem. They are in an upscaling market. The team is credible in the sense what I just said, right? So they have the sense for urgency, very skilled, and they also very importantly, I trust. It's also a lot about trust. I trust them that what they're telling me, they actually can do later, right? So they actually have the capabilities to act on their vision or dream of what they're telling you. And if you have collected that information, then you speak to a lot of people, on the market, and if you're getting positive signals from all of them that are telling you the same, that are telling you, okay, this product that these guys are suggesting, this would help us a lot. Yeah, and if you have 5 people from a potential customer side that are telling you the same, then at least you have a sense of direction of how this investment could pursue. And this is only, I think, the first couple of steps. Then you really also need to do your homework and again, be very diligent on the details, right? And on the people. So this is also, I think, big proportion of the actual work that you do on a day-to-day basis. But I think from a general perspective, this is the core that needs to be there, to make a valid decision making.
And what are the sectors your primary interests are?
Mm-hmm. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I always tell this to founders as well, right? So I think from the very biotech, life sciencey side of things, so hardcore drug development, genetics, novel target identification, hit to lead, and so on. We pay very close attention to that entire industry, because again, I think through novel tech in the last couple of years, especially in the last year, we've seen like big improvement in this entire space of platform technology, data infrastructure
I'm
technology.
so sorry to interrupt you. I only heard biotech. What you said before biotech, the sectors you're interested in, it froze for.
Life science, you meant? I don't even remember what I said.
But what are your primary interest areas when it comes to investing? It froze for a bit, so I couldn't hear you. You said what I heard was only biotech. Did you say before? What did you say before biotech? The ones that you're interested in?
I said basically the first chunk is biotech, life sciences, which is the hardcore science side of things, I would say, as a first thing where all these, drug development topics would go into. The next, I mean, obviously, which is also, I think, very vogue at the time, are like clinical trial executions and everything going in that direction. This is a very interesting, I think, area of interest, because, clinical trials and basically getting to a point where you have a very promising potential medication to the point where you can actually use it on you as a patient. It's very crucial for pharma companies, but also for you as a patient. And making that process better, streamlined, and understanding in a novel way will be also, I think, a center of attention in the next couple of years. And also the next thing, I mean, it's also, I think, no secret that the entire, bucket of back office automation around hospital infrastructure has been very prominent in the last couple of months and years. So everything in reimbursement management, revenue cycle management, basically note taking, basically decreasing that very big bureaucratic overload in the healthcare infrastructure, which is a big problem from the payer side, from you as a patient, for a doctor working in a hospital. So this is a very good example where you always very much agree with founders and every person you speak to. Is this a big problem? And everyone will say, yes, obviously it's a very big problem. Do we have a very simple solution? In most of the cases also, yes, you have, I don't know, AI note takers, and you can have good, B2B SaaS solutions for hospitals, and they're working very good and are connected, and the API systems are working. You have the documentation, the data is flowing, and so on. Is this feasible on the actual, clinic floors? No, right? Is there a like an internet connection in most hospitals? No. Are they having like an iPad to deal with it? No. Yeah. So there you have the problem in these cases. So it's you see in these different chunks, you sometimes have different problems and opportunities. What I'm trying to say is exactly that the challenges that you might encounter over the way might lay in different areas, right? For instance, on that last piece, the regulation implementation question is definitely the most problematic one. So what you seek in a venture when you look at a company is basically, have they found a way of navigating this very complex implementation question? If a founder, approaches me and tells me, okay, I found a AI-driven novel way of documenting like patient-doctor interactions, then I would say, yeah, okay, it looks like a very cool product, but it's not new, right? So I could at least tell you 20 companies that already have a product in that direction. So the USP in that company would not lie in the tech. Yeah. But if now then the founder tells me, but I have, I don't know, a very smart way of integrating that product, because I don't know, I have the high level contacts in the hospitals on the sales front, or I have found a very creative and smart way to structure a business model that these hospitals are more likely to buy it, or I don't know, at least try it and get it implemented, then I would say, well, then it's a very interesting opportunity, right? Because even though the tech is not interesting, in hyphens, but the actual core asset of the company is the implementation question. And this, I think, makes it maybe a little bit more clear what might be very important in making such an investment decision or looking at companies, because it can be very different sometimes, and also not always, looking at the purely tech or product component, because you see a lot of great products on the market already. And the reason is also nice. A study, I think recently, the most likely reasons why startups are failing in the healthcare system are failure of go-to-market or failure of product market fit. That's, I think, by far over 50% reason of why companies in the healthcare sector fail. And that's, I think, also a very interesting, but also very important point to keep in your mind as a founder, but also investor, of what to look for. And this, I think, maybe makes it a little bit more clear of like the different areas.
No, this is fascinating. Genuinely so interesting. When you're exposed to, well, one question I have is, how do you stay up to date on the developments? I mean, obviously, once you like work at the established VC firm and you've been in there for a while, people start to pitch to you, right? Like, or you have contacts that refer people to you. But how do you stay up to date on the startup environment, or like to find the companies before they, become the big, and also when you're exposed to like a novel idea, obviously you're a very smart man. You study medicine, you've done research and all that. But you're also kind of like have a more generalist approach, which means you get to be exposed to so many different ideas, different projects. And obviously founder will know their product better than anybody because they're creating it, they're building it, right? How do you
Right.
educate yourself enough to be able to pass a solid judgment on the product?
Yeah, I think that's also an important lesson to learn, that it's not always down to you to be that person that knows everything, right? So we try in the company, but also for yourself when you work, to take as most advantage as you can from analytic tools, from people, and from knowledge gain on every front. So again, it's not, the main objective for you as an investor to be the expert on a specific tech question. The skill you should bring to the table is more, how do I get to that point of getting a more concrete answer than you might have for yourself, right? And this is also not something you can really learn. It's more, I think, a network question. This also goes a little bit into the first question you asked of how to navigate the market situation a little bit, because you were very right in saying, the core in a very good investment company should be to identify the most promising companies, in best case at a more early stage than the rest, and in the best case when they're not even there yet, basically. Yeah. And this is a very, also I think super blurry task to do, because it's very a lot of underground network, in the sense of you need to just speak to a lot of people. You need to be very present at sites of innovation, and those are universities, because when you are seeking potential founders, then again you need to seek for high potential individuals with a very good education, maybe with some work experience, that are bold enough basically to make the next step and found a company. And you can find them at so many sites, right? Universities, at very good corporates, at already present startups, and so on. So it's a lot of network, I think, and also social, again, interaction needed to be a good investment individual. But again, I also don't want to make it sound that it's only going to like networking events and being in the bubble and just floating around. The most promising founders that we see and know, they're very under the radar. They're very not visible, in the sense that you see them on stage at some event, or that they're very present on LinkedIn or whatever. So this is actually, I think, a core also skill to develop over time, that you have a very, very fine sense, if you will, of potential founders, personas, but also market situations. And then also, I think that you are in a position, coming from a bigger venture capital firm, to actively engage and push such initiatives of those people, so that you interact basically at the very forefront of ideation with them, provide a ecosystem maybe that they would not have in a university setting, and then at the very point of incorporation, place your investment, basically. So this is the best case, and not always like this, right? So it's I wish, right? But if you think of an ideal scenario, then you would act basically like this.
I genuinely feel bad for taking so much of your time. So I'm going to ask my final two questions, and I'm going to let you go after that.
Perfect.
One thing I'm curious about is AI is the boom now, right? And I feel like VCs obviously, still not still VCs obviously adhere to trends, right? The hype, and AI is the hype now. There's even a joke that if you put AI next to your company's name, you'll probably get like a lot of investment. Um, but obviously, the true winners are the people, the companies, the VCs that find that fund and invested in those AI companies before AI was like a mainstream thing that we know right now, right? The LLMs and all that. Um, how do you? Obviously, it's an instinct, it's an intuition to try to like guess the big things. I'm curious about how you approach that, and also, in your personal opinion, what are the frontiers you think are going to be the next? Maybe it might involve AI and application of AI, but I'm just curious, like, where do you see the next frontiers?
Yeah. Again, I think that's very, the holy grail, so to speak, of being a good investment professional, but also, I don't know, if you put your own money into the capital market and trying to figure out what's the next big thing. I mean, on a macro level, I think sometimes it's more easy than you think, but obviously people and also professional investment people are hesitant to act on these trends. I mean, you could also say, um, I don't know, late 80s, people were saying the internet will be the next thing. Then a lot of people would have said, yeah, no, it's never going to be a thing, right? Those computers will always be like, I don't know, just a better typewriter, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, a couple of people I think could imagine what it meant to like implications of to society and so on. And I mean, especially also the early adopters. So, I mean, if you would have invested in Apple in 85, you would have be a very, very
Yeah.
bold
Yeah.
person. But if you invested in Apple in 2000 or through
Mm.
2010, it's not, being like the most, intelligent
Yeah.
wizard, around predicting the future. And the same is a little bit with AI, would have invested in a AI company in 2015. Probably no, because I would have not even, grasped what it meant of AI. I'm not a developer. I'm not a software
Hmm.
person. Now, can we see what AI might do in the future? At least a little bit. Yeah. Is it still in its kinder shoes? Also, yes, right? So, will AI disrupt the entire way of workforce? Probably. And most people I mean, people that are very diligent in the topic are saying definitely. Are people going to push against it? For sure, right? But it's with every, new innovation and disruption in societal arrangement. But again, it I think again on a macro level, it's always easy and hard at the same time to predict what comes next. Yeah? There are certain trends that you can rely on very with being very sure. For instance, that the storage time is decreasing every so and so years. That the level of I don't know computational power will increase over time. You most likely will not see a decrease or a plateau in these settings. So, are you going to bet on quantum computing now? You might be, I don't know, too early. I can't really assess. It's not my core industry. But when you talk medicine, for instance, macro tend definitely that the usage and utilization of data will increase like big time with AI, for instance, and novel tech adoption. And again, it's a very rigid infrastructure and industry. So will this happen tomorrow? Probably no, but you can see like first adopters moving, and this is a good opportunity for early stage investment, maybe, yeah, because you again try to be at the very forefront of these trends. So I don't know, tomorrow every big pharmaceutical company is adopting AI in their drug development pipeline. No, but are they all having pipelines with these technologies? Probably yes,
Yeah.
right? And you see these trends in the market. And again, when you can be very sure that when the big companies are taking care of the topic, then it's a thing,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
So, yeah, if you see the big companies jumping on the ship
Yeah.
and whatever
Yeah.
technology, then it's a very
Mm.
green light for this will most probably be of some kind important in the future. But again, I think in like good investments, it's not about inventing the wheel completely new. It's about creating very tangible products that are for the next 5 to 10 years going to be
Mm.
important. In fusion technology is an interesting topic because already in the 90s people were saying, okay, fusion technology is the next big thing. It has really not been the next big thing for the last 2 decades. Are we seeing now maybe a shift? Could very well be, yeah. So you see a lot of new companies emerging. I can absolutely give no assessment in
Mm.
that direction of now is the time to invest in fusion technology. Maybe it's just hot air again, and
Yeah.
the first fusion reactor will not be until 2080. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so it's always a gamble, but you can I would say collect a couple of metrics in the market that give you at least firm assessment and direction of going.
My go-to saying is I always like come up with this random ideas, and it's because like either I get annoyed at something and I'm like, I wish there was something that would fix that, and I was like, oh, like I wonder is there something like that, right? I've talked to some people, and I don't know, this probably exists or not, but I've talked to some people who been to psychiatrists, and they when they explain how the prescription works, it's also like a trial and error. Like they give you one drug, you either
Yeah,
improve or you don't improve, or you like become worse as they give you another drug, and it's very costly. It's long. It's also like it takes a lot of like a really negative impact on the patient, and I was like, I wish there was a way to really like optimize that so patients don't have to. I don't know if it's personalized medicine. I don't know if it's some kind of like an algorithm AI, but so patients don't have to go through so many different iterations of medicine until they feel better. So I think I don't know that's why I find VC so interesting is because like I feel like you can just like come up with things and then you can say, well, I wonder if there's an idea for it, if there's a company for that. My final question to you will be, and this was an incredible conversation. I genuinely appreciate this. What like the founders that you've met, the ones whose pitch like really stood out, they still remember in your mind. Um, what made their pitch deck or their pitch so memorable?
yeah. Also interesting question because there are also analytics on that topic, on which slide VC spent the most time and so on. And I would probably say again, team, um, solution, and execution will be the most most prominent things in my mind after such a pitch. Because for instance, when you talk about problem, in most cases we will align on the problem. So again, very simple: is there a need for like better cancer treatments throughout the world? Yes. Everybody will say yes, of course, we need better medication for cancer treatments. So I would not be impressed, right, by people identifying that problem. Yeah. And when then people say we need better or more streamlined pipeline in drug discovery, then also everybody probably would say yes, of course. Yeah, it's also common knowledge for years that we need a better assessment in leads and so on. Now, yeah, that's where it gets interesting. Is the proposed idea in what we just spoke about that um, game shifting that would actually caught your eye and you think, okay, wow, this is a
Mm.
thing that I also identified the problem, but maybe I've thought of a similar thing, but this is something that seems actually be of insane value add. Hearing from a person that you can feel that can actually do that, and then when they also tell you something, yeah, and we maneuvered in a direction where we could now execute on this with maybe funding and getting more people, and we already have this network, then you are really intrigued, I think, as a investor, because you see the different, puzzle pieces coming together. And I was just trying to pin out, what's important in such a setting, right? And it's always a combination, also no blueprint, I think, in this setting of how you interact with these companies, because there's also big differentiation between like very early stage companies when you only talk about vision and possibilities and opportunities and this and this, or you talk about an actual, tangible product that's already been on the market for 2 years, and you try to see, okay, how they actually navigated in this last 2 years. Have they managed problems in the right way? Have they acted reacted more to, I don't know, certain challenges? And again, when you see that positive signals, emerging, then I think it's very rememberable in a setting that you think, okay, they accumulated very interesting data points in combination with a very credible team, and then I think you as a um, uh, investment professional are intrigued to pursue this further, right? If that makes
No, it
sense.
makes perfect sense. Henry, this is one of the best episodes I've ever done. I genuinely agree.
I'm glad. Love
This
it.
is fantastic. I feel like this was more than selfishly, I will admit it. I feel like it was more for myself than for the audience because I just learned so much from this conversation. I genuinely, you can really read books, but unless you talk to people who are actually doing it, I feel like that's the best learning, source. Um, So I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Henrik. It's great.
Hi. Thanks also from my side. It was a lot of fun.
I hope to see you at some point in London.
No, definitely. Hit me up every time you're there, and then we grab a coffee.
100%. Take care. Have a good one.
Bye.